Serena, the cruel villainess of an otome game and non-blood-related older sister, torments the heroine and her mother by screaming at them to get out of her sight. Exiled for her numerous misdeeds, the wicked sister ultimately meets a truly miserable end in a dark, lonely cell. However, at the tender age of 7, the young Serena hears the heroine call out to her as the original story begins to unfold. Suddenly struck by a massive revelation, the young girl remembers everything about her past life and the tragic fate that awaits her. Trembling with fear and determination, she covers her mouth and vows that she absolutely refuses to be exiled or live a miserable life. Noticing her sudden distress, the young heroine looks at her with genuine concern and asks if she is okay. Stepping into the grand hallway, their mother calls out to both Serena and Ange to ask whatever is the matter. Gathering her composure to pick up a dropped book, Serena assures her mother that she is quite all right, realizing she is safely on good terms with her family. With a fiery new resolve in her eyes, she silently declares that she will work hard to eliminate any possibility of facing that wretched exile. The title reveals her ultimate predicament, noting that reforming her ways was all in vain because her first love ultimately swept her away. Outside, a grand and classical building stands peacefully under the bright morning sky. The quiet atmosphere is suddenly punctuated by the soft sounds of someone sleeping peacefully. A sudden, violent crash shatters the tranquility, sending birds flying into the sky accompanied by a terrified scream. Sitting up in her extravagant bed, Serena sighs in exasperation, knowing immediately that the commotion is just her mother causing trouble again. Pushing through her lingering exhaustion, the young noblewoman reaches out to pull back the heavy window curtains. Gazing out at the world she now inhabits, she warmly notes the beautiful weather outside her window. Looking at the sprawling architecture, she reflects that this place bears absolutely no resemblance to the modern Japan of her previous life. Instead, the grand stone castles and sweeping cliffs make it look much closer to a setting from medieval Europe. She now resides in a completely mysterious land where dangerous monsters roam freely and magic is incredibly real. The citizens of this fantastical realm live on massive islands floating high in the sky, while a vast sea stretches out endlessly beneath them. Peering down from her lofty home, she admires the boundless ocean stretching out far below the clouds. The water catches the morning light perfectly, shimmering with a brilliant intensity that captivates her completely. Even though the ocean is a forbidden place that the sky dwellers are not permitted to touch, she cannot help but feel drawn to it. Staring wistfully out the window, her eyes soften as she wonders what kind of magical world lies hidden beneath those rolling waves. A deep, aching desire washes over her as she admits to herself just how much she wants to swim in the sea. Deep within her soul, she holds onto cherished memories of a vibrant blue underwater world that she loved with all her heart. Recalling her past existence, she fondly remembers that she absolutely loved everything about the ocean. Back then, she worked as a dedicated scuba diving instructor and spent all her days off doing vital underwater conservation work. She clearly pictures herself in her diving gear, surrounded by the peaceful, bubbling sounds of the deep ocean. For her past self, the endless, sprawling sea was truly her entire world. Her memories of the ocean remain far more vivid than those of her old parents or friends, proving exactly how much she adored it. Gently touching her flowing locks, she smiles, noting that she is quite fond of having hair the exact color of the sea. Stepping confidently down the ornate hall, she introduces herself as Serena, eldest daughter of the Floatos dukedom, who is now only 6 months away from marrying the country's prince. Greeting the day with a cheerful good morning, she throws open the door, only to be met by a chaotic crash and a startled scream. Walking into the dining room to find her biological father, stepsister Ange, and a distressed maid, Serena is immediately begged for help with the morning's newest disaster. Her weeping mother laments that the protection magic she cast on the dishes must have worn off, though she weakly notes the spill prevention spell is thankfully still holding firm. Unfazed by the mess, Serena smoothly extends her hand over the wreckage and conjures a glowing, intricate magic circle. With a graceful motion, she channels her magical energy to instantly reassemble the shattered pieces back into a perfect pot as her family watches in awe. Gazing at her with pure admiration, Ange wishes she could use magic as effortlessly as her sister, admitting that fixing even a single shard takes everything she has. Smiling warmly at her stepsister, Serena graciously offers to watch her practice her magic, making Ange's face light up with eager excitement. Breaking the serious moment, Serena teases the shocked Ange by pointing out her incredibly messy bedhead. As Ange frantically runs off to check a mirror, Serena reflects that even though they are not related by blood, they are undeniably a close and peaceful family. Chuckling softly to herself, she feels a profound sense of relief knowing that the shadow of her tragic, unhappy ending is completely gone. Having successfully stripped away every factor that could get her banished, she knows she truly loves her quirky family with all her heart. However, she worries that once she leaves to get married, it will be incredibly difficult for her mother to handle the housework alone, especially since nobles in this world typically take care of themselves. Struck by a sudden burst of inspiration, Serena suggests to her mother that they should try buying a tool that handles the washing automatically. Pitching the idea of a convenient magic appliance, she watches her mother's face light up at the lovely prospect of an automated dishwasher. Ange agrees that relying entirely on her sister's magic to clean up is unsustainable, and their father nods along, noting he can use tools as well. Clenching her fists with renewed determination, her mother proudly claims she has been breaking fewer dishes lately and stubbornly insists on trying just a little longer. Dropping her shoulders in mild defeat, Serena offers a deadpan response to her mother's stubbornness, realizing her peaceful days will remain chaotic for a bit longer. Realizing the severity of the situation, the father nervously points out that they will completely run out of dishes at their current rate of destruction. The mother gently scolds Ange at the dining table, prompting the young girl to offer a sheepish, apologetic giggle. Staring out her grand window at the sky, Serena reflects that ever since the monumental day it was decided she would become queen, she has dedicated herself entirely to her duties. She tirelessly mastered intricate manners and elegant dance, refined her extensive education, and diligently acquired foreign languages alongside crucial diplomatic knowledge. Taking a quiet moment of reflection, the young noblewoman silently braces herself for the heavy responsibilities that her royal future actively demands. Furthermore, to staunchly protect her beloved citizens, she stands before an audience to demonstrate the rigorous training in national defense and medical magic that she continues to this day. A wave of eager anticipation washes over her as she realizes that she will finally be able to see her mentor, Sensei Ford, now that he has officially returned from the sea. Gazing respectfully at the tall, imposing figure standing by the glowing window, she warmly acknowledges him as her esteemed magic teacher. With deliberate, measured steps, the enigmatic instructor turns away from the window to face his waiting pupil. She deeply admires this man, acknowledging that he is the exceptionally rare individual who holds the prestigious and special title of the Magician of the Azure Sea. Rushing forward to greet him in her elegant dress, Serena joyfully announces that she has been eagerly waiting for her beloved sensei to finally return. The stoic, dark-haired man is formally introduced as Sensei Ford Lucille, commanding the room with his quiet, intense presence. Bowing her head with earnest respect, Serena states she looks forward to his guidance, prompting the stern teacher to declare that they will begin their lessons at once. Sitting diligently beside a wooden mannequin, the young Duchess explains that she is currently learning the complexities of healing magic by actively practicing on a doll. Frustrated by her own limitations, she laments that her magical power simply won't reach the end of the doll's arm, confessing that just making her hand glow takes absolutely everything she has. Raising his hand to intervene, Ford confidently assures his struggling student that if she can just grasp the underlying knack, he is certain she can master it while offering to show her a prime example. With a commanding gaze, the handsome mage effortlessly summons a breathtakingly complex magic circle glowing with ancient script and divine power. The brilliant magical array expands rapidly across the room, bathing the wooden practice doll in a spectacular shower of radiant healing light. Serena's eyes widen into huge, sparkling orbs as she watches the magnificent display, completely awestruck by the sheer, incredible scale of his magical prowess. She mentally reviews the intricate trinity of magical theory, medicine, and magic power, noting that healing magic is an incredibly complex discipline where even a specialist physician cannot heal an entire body all at once. Staring in absolute disbelief at the glowing phenomenon, she marvels that her incredible teacher manages to perform such a monumental feat with just one hand and complete effortlessness. Watching him operate with such flawless grace, she is deeply convinced that he truly deserves his legendary title as the Magician of the Azure Sea. Transitioning to a flashback outside the Grand Estate, Serena recalls that her extraordinary magical lessons with this masterful tutor officially began 3 long years ago. In the past, her father gently broke the news to the family, announcing that starting the very next day, he had formally arranged for a highly specialized magic tutor to visit their home. He proudly explained that since Serena was marrying into the royal family, A special exception had been granted, allowing them the unimaginable honor of being taught by the magician of the Azure Sea himself. Both Serena and Ange blinked in genuine confusion at the grand announcement, their innocent faces betraying their utter lack of familiarity with the terms mage or the Azure Sea. Her father carefully clarified that these uniquely gifted individuals are mages born with exceptional magic power, so rare that only a tiny handful exist in the entire world. Building the suspense beneath the grand chandelier, he leaned in to reveal that, unlike completely ordinary citizens, these phenomenal magic users possess an incredibly unique ability. As a vision of the bubbly, sunlit ocean fills her mind, her father drops the stunning revelation that these special mages can actually dive directly into the Forbidden Sea. While Serena's face instantly lights up with bright, starry-eyed wonder at the thought of the ocean, poor Ange covers her mouth in absolute, eerie dread at the terrifying prospect. Noticing her sister's enthusiastic reaction, a bewildered Ange asks if Serena isn't scared of the deep waters, prompting a happily distracted hum from the ocean-obsessed girl. Smiling warmly at his daughter's contrasting reactions, their father affectionately instructs them to make absolutely sure they learn properly from their distinguished new guest. Standing respectfully in the grand, sunlit study, the two young girls nervously face the tall, imposing back of their newly arrived instructor. Offering a polite, deferential smile to her new mentor, Serena gracefully thanks him for taking the time to teach them and firmly promises to do her very best. Caught up in her older sister's determined energy, a blushing Ange clenches her fists and enthusiastically declares that she will also do her absolute best. Turning his sharp, handsome profile to evaluate the two girls, Ford offers a cool, professional greeting, stating simply that he looks forward to working with them. As the strict teacher immediately dives into basic magical theory with an open tome, the sisters secretly communicate, with Serena noting his stunningly handsome features while acknowledging he certainly doesn't seem like the friendly type. The rigorous academic lessons quickly prove overwhelming for the poor, sweating Ange, who hides behind her textbook in utter confusion while Serena diligently takes fastidious notes with her quill. Trembling slightly under the crushing weight of the complex theory, Ange peeks over her thick book to timidly confess to the intimidating sensei that she simply does not understand the material. Rather than offering warm encouragement, the frighteningly intense mage silently levels a piercing, unblinking stare directly at the terrified young girl. Attempting to shatter the suffocating tension, the kindly mother enters with a refreshing tray of tea, lightly teasing the absolutely terrified, violently trembling Ange about how painfully tense the room has become. Unfortunately, the overwhelming nervous pressure proves too much for the jittery young student, causing a delicate teacup to slip directly from her shaking fingers and splat tragically across the floor. A horrifying gasp gets caught in the sisters' throats as the scalding tea splashes aggressively against the famously unforgiving instructor's immaculate, dark coat. In the chaotic aftermath, a weeping Ange cries that he is far too scary for her to even focus on her studies, leading the stressed parents to strongly consider turning down the famously difficult mage, though Serena frantically begs them to keep things exactly as they are. Desperate to maintain her one connection to the ocean, Serena adamantly shouts her agreement when her worried parents ask if she is truly sure she will be okay alone, silently noting he is the very first person she has ever met who can actually go to the sea. Staring wistfully out the sunlit window, Serena rationalizes that ever since remembering her previous life, she has been burning up with an unbearable longing for the ocean, making their solo breaks the absolute perfect chance to interrogate him about it. Mustering every ounce of her courage as she thoughtfully pours him a fresh cup of tea, the determined young noblewoman politely asks her imposing mentor if she might inquire about the sea. The incredibly handsome, dark-haired magician stops completely still, his sharp, piercing eyes shifting slightly to carefully evaluate his exceptionally curious young student. Undeterred by his intense, silent scrutiny, Serena pushes forward with her burning question, asking him straight out how exactly one manages to successfully enter the legendary sea. Holding his delicate teacup in complete, unbroken silence, Sensei Ford offers absolutely no immediate response to the girl's shockingly eager marine inquiry. Reflecting on her previous actions, she wonders if she had been overly rude after all. Her eyes widen in stunned realization as she breathes out the legendary title of the Magician of the Azure Sea. The magician explains how he submerges his crown-granted island into the ocean depths. He then harvests valuable resources from the seabed to deliver directly to the kingdom. Clasping her hands together, she notes that the sea provides most of their resources. He confirms her thought, adding that this vital harvest is exactly why the kingdom grants his kind such high status and authority. Rising from the table, the magician declares that their lesson for the day has concluded. She sits quietly, her mind swirling with greedy curiosity about the wondrous creatures living beneath the ocean waves. Despite the abrupt end, she feels a profound sense of happiness radiating through her. The simple fact that her teacher shared stories of the sea with her is more than enough to lift her spirits. Sliding a heavy, ornate book across the table, he presents her with a gift. He offers the tome simply because she had been so incredibly curious to learn more. Gasping in pure delight, she excitedly recognizes an illustration of a dolphin. She overflows with gratitude and profusely thanks him for the wonderful book. The dark-haired sensei watches her exuberant reaction with a quiet, stoic expression. Flipping through the pages, she marvels that this world shares the exact same sea creatures, like sea turtles, as her previous life. A wistful longing washes over her as she admits how much she would love to see them in person. Hearing her heartfelt wish, a faint, almost imperceptible softening shifts the magician's usually serious gaze. Peering up from the heavy book, she catches his eye as he softly remarks that she is the only one. She realizes he has indulged her endless questions without showing even a single hint of displeasure. Overwhelmed by his unexpected kindness, she is deeply moved that he would treat her with such gentle patience. Sparkling with sudden emotion, her eyes widen as a powerful realization takes root in her heart. Blushing furiously behind the open pages, she is completely caught off guard by the sudden fluttering feeling in her chest. She stammers in shock, realizing she might have just witnessed him actually smile. While her sensei stares at her in mild confusion, she flusteredly hides her crimson face behind the heavy tome. Clutching the book tightly, she vows to savor this precious memory all to herself. Transitioning to a grand sunlit estate, the magician announces that they will now move on to practical magic. He turns to his student and asks if she has her magic stone ready for the lesson. Lifting her hand with unwavering confidence, she affirms that she is completely prepared. Displaying his own necklace, he explains that the stone is the essential medium required to channel and use magic. He strictly instructs her to keep it on her person at all times, to which she dutifully agrees. Observing the crimson gem resting against his chest, she notes that her sensei's magic stone is red. He casually brushes off the observation, claiming it is merely something he had lying around. Remembering her studies, she recalls that magicians of the Azure Sea are traditionally gifted blue stones by their families or the crown. These azure gems serve as a heartfelt prayer for their safe return from the treacherous ocean depths. Smiling warmly to herself, she decides that a deep blue magic stone would definitely suit him far better than his current red one. She playfully questions his excuse that he is merely using something he just had on hand. Gazing at his striking features, she envisions a gem perfectly matched to his dark eyes and hair. She imagines a stone possessing a rich, blue-black hue that perfectly mirrors the mysterious depths of the deep sea. Standing before a skilled jeweler, she instructs the man to set her chosen magic stone into a specific pedestal. A flicker of nervous anticipation dances in her mind as she wonders if her sensei would actually accept the gift from her. Approaching her teacher hesitantly, she tries to get his attention before he departs. He abruptly cuts in with a sharp click, announcing that he will be diving again tomorrow and won't return for a few months. With a precise, deliberate motion, the dark-haired magician pops open the lid of a small, intricately carved box. Inside the velvet-lined container rests a stunning, tasseled jewel that catches the light. Answering her bewildered question, he plainly states that it is a magic stone. Presenting the glowing gift to her teacher, she earnestly prays for him to return safely from his dangerous voyage. Looking up at him with deep respect, she swears she will be eagerly looking forward to the day he can teach her again. For the first time, the stoic magician's eyes widen in genuine, undisguised astonishment at her heartfelt gesture. A heavy, emotionally charged silence stretches between them as the weight of her parting gift truly settles in. Slowly and carefully, his large hands cradle the ornate box containing the gleaming, tasseled magic stone. Looking down at the precious azure gem, a soft sigh escapes his lips. Breaking his usual composed silence, he humbly and quietly thanks her for the thoughtful present. Beaming with a blindingly radiant smile, she reflects that he gave her so much more than just a simple education in magic. Her sensei taught her countless valuable lessons about the world and the mysteries of the vast sea. Yet, most importantly, his gentle presence awakened the faint, tender feelings of affection blossoming deep within her heart. Snapping back to the present, her eyes dart to the magician's dark coat. She is thrilled to see that the deep blue brooch she gifted him is still proudly pinned right there on his chest. Caressing her own jewelry, she fiercely treasures the beautiful magic stone gathered from the sea that her sensei gave her in return. Clenching her fists with renewed determination, she vows to give her upcoming duties her absolute best effort. She refuses to let even a single drop of her beloved sensei's invaluable teachings go to waste. Returning to their quiet tea session, he calmly assesses her progress and notes that at her current level, there should be no problems. Taking a sip of his tea, he praises her, stating that her knowledge seems quite sufficient for the trials ahead. Sitting tall, she confidently declares that she is now fully prepared to protect their citizens and can marry into the royal family with true peace of mind. Turning his gaze toward the towering castle outside the window, he quietly observes her changing fate. He notes with a hint of melancholy that by this time next year, she will be royalty herself. A bittersweet pang tightens her chest as she realizes she has so little time left to learn from her beloved teacher. Lowering her eyes, she softly confesses that she shall truly miss these quiet moments together. Pouring all her unspoken emotions into a single phrase, she deeply thanks her sensei for absolutely everything he has done. He holds her gaze steadily as her internal monologue continues its grateful litany. She silently thanks him for gifting her with vital knowledge, the secrets of magic, and the wonders of the sea. Staring at his handsome face, her heart aches with a poignant, undeniable truth. She is eternally grateful to him for teaching her exactly what the exhilarating, painful rush of first love truly feels like. Turning her back to him in the sunlit courtyard, she accepts that her upcoming engagement to the prince is strictly a bond of friendship and duty, not romantic love. Walking away toward her royal future, she gravely doubts she will ever feel this passionate way again for the rest of her life. The vast, cloudy sky stretches infinitely above, mirroring the expansive and uncertain future that lies ahead of her. Transitioning to a bustling pottery workshop, she explains they are there to replace the dishes her mother recently broke. An artisan proudly presents fresh ceramics straight out of the kiln, while a woman gasps in awe, wondering if this is the famous piece everyone has been talking about. Ange kindly offers to cast a protection spell on the new dishes before the shopkeeper wraps them up. The others chuckle at her thoughtful nature, musing that her mother breaking the old plates wasn't in vain after all. Leaving the warm workshop behind, Ange and her companions descend the worn stone steps into the bustling town below. Lamenting their lack of critical political connections with the Sandal and Claudia families, the stressed aristocratic group desperately wishes their overworked father could have joined them to help navigate their impending societal problems. Suddenly, a desperate, echoing cry for help shatters the peaceful afternoon, startling the passing noblewomen as they approach a shadowed alleyway. Two menacing, rough-looking thugs loom aggressively over a terrified woman who cowers helplessly against the cold, rough stone wall. Dropping her packages in a sudden flash of fiery determination, Ange completely ignores her older companion's shocked gasp and immediately springs into heroic action. Shouting for the violent thugs to stop their assault, she recklessly charges straight into the narrow alley while bravely conjuring a glowing, complex magical shield. A thunderous, blinding crash abruptly shatters the alley's tension as her powerful magical burst violently connects with its intended target. The devastating magical impact spectacularly blasts the two ruffians clean off their feet, sending them tumbling into the dirt alongside the scattered, bruised fruit of the rescued woman. Sighing heavily as the startled victim hastily gathers her tumbling fruit, Ange's older companion wryly observes that the young woman's clumsy nature always causes her to charge headfirst into unnecessary trouble. Alerted by the booming magical commotion, an armed city officer quickly arrives on the scene as a helpful local shopkeeper eagerly points out the troublesome thugs as the girls meekly apologize and offer to pay for the extensive collateral damage. The exasperated shopkeeper reveals that the completely smashed stone wall actually belonged to the prestigious Sandal family. The tightly restrained, bruised punks flinch in sheer terror as the furious officer sharply and aggressively reprimands them for their destructive, criminal behavior. Securing the bound criminals for transport, the deeply grateful officer earnestly thanks the young ladies for finally putting a decisive stop to the ruffians who had been relentlessly terrorizing the neighborhood. The shopkeeper chuckles and assures the stunned women that Lord Sandor will actually be immensely grateful for their intervention, as even the powerful lord had his hands full dealing with this particular gang. Grasping her savior's hands in profound gratitude, the rescued woman formally introduces herself as Lily from the House of Claudia and warmly expresses her earnest desire to become much better acquainted. Watching the miraculous coincidence gracefully unfold, Serena inwardly marvels at Ange's sheer protagonist privilege, realizing her sister's clumsy, reckless bravery just effortlessly solved their family's greatest political hurdles. Walking through the bustling, sunlit streets alongside her radiant sister, Serena humbly concedes that she is simply no match for Ange's incredible, seemingly divinely ordained luck. Their triumphant stroll is suddenly interrupted by a familiar, cheerful voice smoothly calling out to them from the picturesque cobblestone path. A dashingly handsome blonde man with a bright, charming smile gracefully intercepts their path, revealing he was casually just about to head over to their ducal residence himself. Serena internally identifies the majestic figure as Prince Laddle, the revered future ruler of the kingdom and her officially betrothed fiancé. Bubbling with uncontainable, infectious excitement, Ange immediately leaps forward to enthusiastically regale the attentive prince with the thrilling, dramatic tale of their recent alleyway skirmish. The grand, imposing architecture of the ducal estate looms quietly against the bright daytime sky as the royal escort finally arrives at the lavish gates. The heavy wooden doors clatter open as the weary but triumphant group finally steps into the opulent grand foyer and formally announces their long-awaited return. The estate's staff bows deeply and respectfully to welcome the prince, just before a frantic servant urgently summons Ange for a pressing matter. As Ange blinks in mild surprise, the Duke smoothly steps in to politely welcome Prince Laddle, simultaneously announcing that they have already received an incredibly urgent message from the Claudia family. While the panicked mother hysterically frets over the newly protected dishes, the unfazed, smiling Duke proudly declares that their entire family has officially been invited to an exclusive tea by the Claudias. Smiling warmly at the sheer, unfiltered domestic chaos unfolding before him, Prince Laddle playfully dismisses Serena's polite apologies and charmingly notes that her family is as wonderfully lively as ever. Settling comfortably into the plush parlor seats, the relaxed prince casually mentions that Ange had already eagerly told him all about befriending the young Claudia heiress during the violent commotion. Serena calmly confirms the incredible chain of events, verifying that the rescued, vulnerable girl was indeed the Claudia heiress and the thoroughly demolished stone wall belonged to the Sandal estate. She marvels silently at the sheer impossibility of the situation, noting aloud that both prominent houses were the exact high society connections her father desperately needed for his crucial political work. Chuckling softly at Ange's trademark, undeniable luck, the thoroughly amused prince casually shrugs off the property damage and smoothly declares that all is well that ends well. Hiding her quiet, intense contemplation behind the porcelain rim of a delicate teacup, Serena gazes thoughtfully at her fiancé's beautifully relaxed and endlessly forgiving demeanor. Feeling a deep, comforting sense of relief wash over her, she internally rejoices that Prince Laddle is always so incredibly understanding and tolerant of her family's wild eccentricities. Reflecting on their comfortable dynamic, she acknowledges that while they never shared a fiery, passionate romance, their steadfast bond of solid trust and deep friendship will undoubtedly make them a magnificent ruling couple. The quiet, peaceful atmosphere of the parlor is suddenly punctuated by the prince's soft, uncharacteristically hesitant voice as he gently calls out her name. Blinking in mild, curious confusion at his unusually serious tone, she tilts her head and simply asks what he needs. Flashing a quick, dismissive smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes, he smoothly waves off his own lingering thought and hastily apologizes for the random interruption. Later that evening, the heavy, isolating silence of the sprawling estate settles around Serena as she exhausted ascends the grand staircase, once again the very last person awake in the manor. Entering her lavish but dimly lit bedchamber, she sighs heavily at the daunting, towering piles of political work and intense study materials still waiting to be conquered. Her endless, exhausting responsibilities weigh heavily on her mind, ranging from constantly cleaning up after her family's chaotic blunders to flawlessly managing intricate royal wedding preparations and dense ducal affairs. Collapsing face-first into her plush, inviting mattress, she agonizingly laments that the crushing mountain of work simply never ends, leaving her so profoundly exhausted she cannot even naturally drift off to sleep. Despite the bone-deep fatigue, a glowing vision of her royal future alongside the king solidifies her resolve, firmly reminding her that she truly doesn't mind the immense effort because the noble work itself is deeply rewarding. Pushing aside the lingering anxieties and endless duties of the day, she finally commands her weary body to surrender and decides she absolutely must get to sleep soon. Nestled securely into her luxurious pillows, she holds desperately onto the comforting, unwavering belief that these endlessly busy yet beautifully peaceful days will simply continue on forever. A fond, tired smile touches her lips as she fully expects her mother's inevitable, boisterous morning commotion to abruptly wake her up again tomorrow to start the wonderful cycle anew. Drifting into a deep, well-deserved slumber beneath the heavy silken canopy, she softly whispers to herself that this perfect, meticulously cultivated life will last forever and always. The grand, sprawling ducal estate stands in complete, majestic silence beneath a breathtaking canopy of glittering nighttime stars, completely oblivious to the heartbreak looming on the horizon. The older Serena's voice ominously echoes through the narrative, bitterly reflecting that she had believed in that eternal peace without a single shadow of a doubt, only for reality to cruelly intervene. Her entire world shatters in tragic hindsight as she utterly fails to comprehend how Prince Ladle could ever cast her so callously aside just to suddenly get engaged to her younger sister Ange. The painful memory vividly transitions to the fateful, devastating day she was formally and coldly summoned to the imposing royal castle for her ultimate humiliation. Kneeling in the oppressive silence of the grand throne room, she faces the stern king in a heavily guarded chamber where her anxious parents and the entire royal family have formally gathered to ruthlessly seal her fate. The devastating revelation came directly from the very lips of the two citizens she had placed her absolute, unwavering trust in. Lady Serena sat in heavy, suffocating silence, her ornate dress and composed posture belying the shocking betrayal she was currently absorbing. She found herself confronted with an utterly unbelievable proposal that threatened to permanently upend her entire calculated existence. Struggling to process the sheer audacity of the words, she calmly clarified if they were truly demanding the sudden dissolution of her highly publicized state engagement to Prince Ladle. Prince Ladle bowed his head in pathetic shame, confessing he had absolutely no excuse, while a tearful Ange choked out a desperate, incomplete apology beside him. Serena internally questioned if absolutely no one would intervene to halt this staggering madness, deeply stunned that a crucial state marriage was being ruthlessly overturned at the very last moment. A heavy, suffocating silence descended upon the grand, candlelit hall as Serena stared down the deeply guilty, trembling couple standing before her throne. Realizing the complete futility of any further resistance, she coldly and logically acknowledged that the scandalous matter had already been entirely settled behind her back. Maintaining her flawless, regal composure, Serena correctly noted that she was now the only one left to formally provide an answer regarding the abrupt cancellation of her engagement to His Highness Ladle. She carefully weighed the bitter, humiliating reality of publicly accepting Prince Ladle's sudden new engagement to her own sister, Ange. Trembling violently with tears, Ange pitifully claimed she had desperately tried to suppress her feelings to avoid betraying their mother, offering a weak, weeping apology for her ultimate romantic failure. Ladle immediately echoed the shallow apologies, insisting he simply could not bear the crushing guilt of marrying Serena while secretly harboring deep, passionate feelings for Ange. Observing Ladle gently console the weeping Ange, Serena calmly and stoically accepted the harsh reality of their deep betrayal with a simple, quiet murmur of understanding. She logically reasoned that unlike her own polite feelings of mere friendship and dutiful obligation, the two betrayers standing before her truly did share a profound, undeniable love for one another. Recognizing the cold, calculating politics at play, Serena understood that the royal family and the dukedom cared extremely little about which specific sister fulfilled the marital arrangement to become the crown princess. She mentally conceded that Ange, sharing a genuine and fiery mutual love with His Highness Ladle, was actually the one truly suited for the prestigious royal role, though a massive political problem still remained. The core, inescapable issue was that their initial engagement had already been heavily publicized internationally, and Serena possessed absolutely no desire to publicly betray the steadfast trust of their devoted citizens. Taking brilliant control of the shifting narrative, she firmly commanded them to do everything in their power to make the citizens and allies understand that Ange was the rightful crown princess, ensuring the global public could peacefully celebrate this sudden new engagement. Shocked by her stunningly graceful capitulation, an intense Prince Ladle solemnly swore to fulfill her difficult condition, while a massively relieved Ange eagerly shouted her agreement. Seeing their pathetic, desperate relief, she finalized her monumental decision to smoothly step away from the tangled, toxic political web. With a remarkably steady and commanding voice, Serena formally declared to the entire royal court that she had absolutely no reason to object to the dissolution. She magnanimously and diplomatically stated that it was ultimately for the absolute best that two citizens who were undeniably drawn to one another should be allowed to stay together. The king, sitting atop his imposing throne, solemnly accepted her flawless diplomatic decision and formally addressed Lady Serena with deep respect. The powerful monarch offered his deepest, most sincere gratitude for her incredibly compassionate and politically convenient sacrifice. He further praised her unyielding dedication, thanking her profusely for all the arduous, grueling years she had dutifully devoted to the prosperity of their country. Thanking her one final time, the king ordered her to rest and boldly promised that the royal house would entirely guarantee her future, offering full support for absolutely anything she wished to pursue. Shifting his imposing, wrathful gaze toward the incredibly guilty couple, the king's tone darkened severely as he addressed Lattle and Ange directly. He fiercely reprimanded them for violently pushing through an act that would normally be entirely unforgivable, sternly forbidding them from relying on Serena's grace and commanding them to reflect deeply on the selfish reasons for their union. As the tense audience dispersed from the grand hall into the corridors, hushed murmurs rippled through the royal onlookers who expressed profound relief that the highly explosive situation had ended so peacefully. The momentary peace was instantly shattered as Serena's mother hurriedly rushed toward her with a look of desperate, wide-eyed panic. Grasping her stoic daughter, the deeply distraught mother sobbed out a chaotic mixture of profound thanks and truly pathetic, weeping apologies for the humiliating public ordeal. Two older, deeply remorseful nobles stepped forward to apologize as well, shamefully admitting they had known about the affair for some time but cowardly chose to spring it on her suddenly, causing her immense pain. Dismissing their groveling, Serena coolly told her mother and the nobles to drop their reserved formalities, bluntly reminding them that she and Lattle had never harbored any real romantic feelings for one another to begin with. Turning her piercing, commanding attention back to her trembling sister, she softly and intentionally called out Ange's name. Gently cupping Ange's tear-stained face, Serena delivered a powerful, undeniable ultimatum, demanding that if Ange truly felt guilty for wronging her, she must devote herself entirely to making their citizens infinitely happier. She fiercely charged her sister to impeccably fulfill her heavy responsibilities to both the dukedom and the royal family, ensuring that Serena would never regret her massive sacrifice and could truly believe Ange was the right choice for crown princess. Later that day, the grand, imposing architecture of the massive estate loomed quietly under the sky, serving as a stark, silent monument to the day's dramatic political upheaval. Wandering through the sprawling, opulent grounds of the Valendamian estate in Campion, Serena thoughtfully wondered when the treacherous, hidden affair had actually begun. She reflected bitterly on the subtle, highly insidious way the interpersonal dynamics had slowly changed between the two betrayers over the past few months. Clutching a heavy tome to her chest, she admitted to herself that she had harbored a vague inkling of their romance all along, yet consciously chose to look the other way because she felt utterly powerless to stop it. Gazing pensively out the window, she conceded that the bright and proactive couple would likely lead the citizens in a good direction, marveling at how brilliantly they had managed to manipulate and change their desperate situation. Staring at a delicate, beautiful arrangement of blooming flowers, the harsh, irrevocable reality finally washed over her completely. She was officially no longer the crown princess. Reaching out to gently touch a faintly glowing, magical tome in the grand library, she wistfully realized that mastering these complex, arcane arts would no longer be her royal duty either. A heavy wave of profound melancholy crashed into her as she realized that all those harsh, grueling, yet deeply fulfilling days she had spent meticulously preparing to become queen had now been rendered entirely meaningless. Tracing the intricate, cold metal of a mysterious, magical bracelet, her thoughts desperately drifted to her absent mentor as she whispered her sensei's name into the quiet, empty room. She wondered with a desperate, burning hope if he would ever be willing to teach her the vast secrets of magic once again, even for a disgraced, cast-aside woman like herself. Her heart ached with an intense, overwhelming desire to see him right now and ask for his crucial guidance, though she mournfully recalled that it had been months since they last met and he was currently somewhere far away at the bottom of the sea. The king's powerful, echoing promise haunted her tired mind, reminding her that he had pledged his absolute, unwavering support for absolutely anything she now wished to pursue. Exhausted beyond all human measure by the day's brutal emotional toll, Serena finally collapsed heavily onto the massive, soft expanse of her ornate bed. Staring blankly into the creeping shadows of her quiet chambers, Her sorrow began to harden into a fierce, simmering determination as she finally crystallized the one true thing she desperately wanted to do with her new freedom. Lying heavily bandaged in her bed, Serena quietly reflected on her current physical state. Her exhausted mind drifted lazily as she longed to simply swim away in a dark, comforting sea. Denying herself the luxury of wallowing in self-pity, she immediately handed the wedding preparations to Ange and focused entirely on mastering her ducal duties. She pragmatically reasoned that sooner or later, she would inevitably receive a brand new marriage proposal to replace the one she lost. Despite calmly accepting her new reality, she solemnly acknowledged that she could no longer hope for a truly favorable romantic match. She comforted her wounded pride with the thought that this political demotion was still vastly preferable to the horrific bad ending from the game. Staring out her window into the dark night, she recalled the lonely game ending where she was completely abandoned, grateful that she now retained the royal family's powerful protection. Her quiet, melancholy contemplation was abruptly shattered by the violent crash of breaking porcelain and a startled gasp from the hallway. A flustered maid urgently called out to Lady Serena, desperately requesting her immediate presence to deal with the sudden commotion. Without a second of hesitation, she turned away from the moonlit window and rushed out of her bedroom to investigate the sharp noise. Calling back that she was on her way, she felt a brief wave of relief knowing her family was at least still on relatively good terms. Stepping quietly into the grand parlor, she observed Prince Ladle and Ange sitting comfortably together reading a thick book. An older maid kneeling to clean up a shattered teacup on the floor happily exclaimed that the prince had finally arrived. Her mother beamed with absolute delight, noting how helpful Prince Ladle's frequent visits had been while magical cleaning runes swept up the broken porcelain. The older woman highly praised the cautious prince for perfectly balancing out their tomboyish Ange, noting how well he patiently guided her. Serena offered a simple, completely neutral murmur of agreement as she blankly watched the affectionate couple interact. She strictly reminded her mother that mere affection wasn't enough, stressing that they desperately needed a solid political justification to prove Ange was more beneficial to the country. An older nobleman suddenly approached, openly admitting that it was incredibly difficult to find any trait in Ange that outshone Serena's vast, undeniable capabilities. The respectful nobleman asked to entrust her with some urgent ducal duties, and Serena smoothly agreed to spare him the time. She dutifully followed the older man down a dark, winding stone staircase illuminated only by the faint, flickering glow of his lantern. As they approached a heavy, ancient door at the very bottom of the stairs, Serena immediately recognized the highly secret location. The man held up his lantern to illuminate the floor, confirming they had arrived at the highly secured room housing the teleportation magic circle. He noted that she was already quite familiar with the hidden chamber, as the family regularly used it to quickly travel to their remote island villa. Turning to face her in the gloom, he firmly stated his absolute intention to teach her exactly how to operate the complex magical device herself. The heavy weight of his sudden request hung thickly in the cold, dimly lit stone corridor as she silently processed the immense responsibility. After meticulously explaining the arcane mechanics, he asked if she completely understood the delicate operation of the teleportation circle. Handing over the room's key, he gravely warned her to be absolutely certain of her destination, as a single magical mistake could jeopardize the safety of the entire world. Walking back up the stairs, he commented that while the household transition was going smoothly, they still desperately needed a public excuse for the broken engagement. Outside the grand estate, Prince Ladle stood entirely alone in the lush gardens, gazing pensively up at the cloudy, turbulent sky. Time marched on relentlessly, bringing the dreadful day of the official announcement closer even as they scrambled to invent a proper justification for the switch. The mounting political pressure created a suffocating atmosphere, causing highly visible signs of desperate panic to fracture her family's usual composure. Peeking quietly through a slightly cracked door, Serena solemnly observed her family's frantically growing anxiety. She firmly reminded herself that she could not help them fix this specific, self-inflicted mess, resigning herself to merely watching over their pathetic struggles. Her quiet eavesdropping was abruptly interrupted as her entire body violently jolted forward without any warning. Stumbling wildly in the grand hallway, she looked down in complete confusion, realizing there was absolutely nothing on the flat marble floor to trip over. She rubbed her forehead, deeply frustrated by her recent, inexplicable trend of constantly bumping into large objects and tripping over thin air. A dark, highly unsettling suspicion began to slowly creep into her brilliant mind as she mathematically analyzed her failing coordination. She desperately tried to rationalize the terrifying clumsiness, jokingly wondering if her mother and sister's infamous lack of physical grace had somehow rubbed off on her. Standing entirely alone among the silent marble statues, she firmly rejected the joke, knowing deep within her soul that something was genuinely, terribly wrong. The creeping, invisible dread finally culminated in a massive disruption on one particularly fateful morning. A frantic, highly echoing shout of her own name violently shattered the quiet, peaceful sanctuary of her bedchamber. Groaning groggily, she pulled back her heavy bed curtains to find someone urgently trying to rouse her from a deep sleep. Slipping out of bed before the sun had even crested the horizon, she nervously wondered what terrible disaster could have prompted such an early awakening. Her mother burst into the room with manic, uncontained energy, loudly declaring that they were immediately departing for the remote villa. Serena blinked in absolute bewilderment, completely taken aback by the sudden, highly aggressive demand to relocate across the country. Her mother guiltily explained their new political excuse, begging Serena to live on the remote island under the totally pretense of recovering from a severe illness. The sheer audacity of the highly cowardly plan washed over her in complete, stunning silence. With a deadened, entirely emotionless tone, she simply acknowledged the cruel perfection of their incredibly selfish strategy. She coldly summarized their plan, confirming she was being entirely banished to an isolated island starting immediately to make her fake, illness-based withdrawal seem legitimate. Her desperate mother eagerly confirmed the plan and pleaded for her immediate cooperation, promising to frame the tragic exile in a way that supposedly wouldn't ruin Serena's prospects. Serena coolly agreed that there was certainly no better reason for her sudden departure from the estate. Her mother clasped her hands in joyous relief, profusely thanking Serena as the young woman agreed to the convenient plan. Startled by a sudden, firm grip on her hand, Serena gasped as her mother immediately declared they were heading to the teleportation room right that second. Dragged forcefully down the cold stone steps in nothing but her thin nightgown, Serena desperately pleaded for a brief moment to properly prepare. Ignoring her daughter's protests, the frantic mother explained that Father and Ange were already securing an audience with the king to report the engagement change. Reaching the basement teleportation circle, her mother clumsily adjusted the magical dials while promising the remote villa had everything required for a relaxing stay. Satisfied with her hasty magical tinkering, the older woman promised they would join her that very night and offered a cheerful, completely ignorant farewell. A brilliant, blinding light instantly engulfed the massive stone chamber as the arcane teleportation circle roared to life. Shielding her eyes from the intense magical glare, Serena sighed and admitted she actually wanted a break anyway, mildly amused by her mother's relentless drive. As the magical transportation finalized, she happily envisioned spending her exile reading quietly in a beautiful garden overlooking the sparkling sea. The blinding light finally faded, leaving her standing in complete, stunning silence. Instead of a luxurious seaside villa, Serena found herself entirely alone in the middle of a dense, overgrown, and untamed jungle. Towering ancient trees and thick, oppressive foliage completely swallowed the surrounding landscape in an ominous green haze. Panic instantly seized her chest as she recognized the terrifying, intensely hostile environment she had just materialized in. A chilling memory abruptly resurfaced of the older nobleman explicitly warning her that the basement circle secretly connected to Monster Island. In the terrifying flashback, a younger Serena stared at him in sheer, absolute horror at the mere mention of the cursed island. The man gravely explained that it was a desolate, inescapable prison for abominable, human-devouring creatures that once roamed the world freely. He confirmed that their ducal house had been secretly entrusted with managing the highly dangerous island where the beasts had been subdued long ago. Trembling with fear, she had questioned their direct involvement with the single most terrifying place on the entire planet. The nobleman quickly reassured her that the teleportation spell was strictly one way, ensuring the bloodthirsty beasts could never escape to their estate. He added that any actual visits to the island strictly required the heavy protection of fully armored, elite mage soldiers. Snapping back to the present memory, he instructed her to simply learn the operation, which she dutifully and obediently accepted. Back in the horrifying present, Serena clutched her face in utter disbelief, praying she hadn't actually been sent to the deadly monster sanctuary by accident. A sudden, violent rustling in the dense bushes nearby caused her to gasp sharply in sheer terror. Adrenaline flooded her veins as she frantically wondered how this catastrophic, incredibly deadly error could have possibly happened. Recalling her mother's clumsy, hurried adjustments to the magic dials, Serena realized with horrific clarity that the older woman had accidentally misdirected the entire spell. Staring at the dead, overgrown stones beneath her feet, she grimly remembered that the one-way magic circle would absolutely never activate again. The crushing realization compounded her despair as she remembered leaving her crucial, life-saving portable teleportation tool back in her bedroom. Completely stranded and entirely defenseless, she correctly deduced that her family wouldn't even notice the catastrophic error until that evening. The dense, tropical foliage loomed silently around her, offering absolutely no shelter or hope of rescue. She stared down in horror at her delicate, entirely inappropriate nightgown and bare feet planted firmly on the rough jungle floor. Glancing upward through the thick canopy, she noted the high sun meant she had hours left to survive completely alone. A sickening sense of impending doom washed over her as she calculated she would be trapped in the monster-infested jungle until nightfall. The deafening, violent sound of trees snapping nearby indicated a massive predator was rapidly approaching her position. Serena whipped her head around, her eyes widening in sheer, primal terror at the approaching, unseen threat. A massive, horrifying beast with 3 swirling eyes and a gaping, razor-filled maw lunged violently from the dark shadows. Scrambling desperately through the thick underbrush, she knew with absolute certainty that the monstrous predator intended to slaughter her. Pushing her exhausted, fragile body to the absolute limit, she furiously commanded herself to keep running no matter the cost. Her breath hitched painfully in her chest as sheer, unadulterated panic consumed her completely. The deafening roar of the pursuing beast violently shook the surrounding trees, closing the distance rapidly. Collapsing onto the cold ground, surrounded by glowing, sinister eyes in the darkness, she finally accepted that she could not run any further. The beast's massive, slavering jaws snapped open, preparing to devour her completely whole. Facing her imminent, highly gruesome death, she bitterly regretted that she had to die in such a terrifying, miserable place. Closing her eyes, she wistfully wished she could have died peacefully deep within the dark, comforting sea instead. Suddenly, a brilliant, highly complex magic circle illuminated the ground, and a tall, mysterious man in a long coat materialized flawlessly right in front of her. The handsome, dark-haired newcomer casually glanced over his shoulder, calmly calling out her name as if he had simply been looking for her in a crowded room.